Bill.
I'm eating cup.
Good evening, Houdat Nation, and a special good evening to our Bayou Blitz family. I am Bob Rose. I'd love to welcome you into our Wednesday night Bayou Blitz podcast. I am one of your co-hosts for this evening, and joining me is my partner in crime, and looking like he's stationed at home again, Brendan Boylan. How are you tonight, Brendan?
It's crazy, isn't it? Back-to-back weeks at home. What is this? No, I'm happy to be home. Happy to see a lot of our usuals already in the chat. I wish we had some happier Saints football to discuss, but nonetheless, I also just wanted to give a quick shout out to our buddy John Hendricks, who is across the pond, probably asleep right now. But just a quick shout out. He was great here in Charlotte. We got to hang out, grab a bite. And I know, talk about a flight schedule. We talk about me traveling, Bob. That man was in Charlotte, in New Orleans for maybe 24 hours, and then off to London. So I'll take me at home over that kind of trip any day. But I know he's having a blast over there. But Bob, we have a lot to talk about in terms of what's going on with the New Orleans Saints. I mean, you guys see the title of the podcast today. What is wrong with the Saints offense? And we will get to that. We'll also get to what you guys voted on in our Twitter poll, and that is week 4 a must win? But let's go ahead and start with week 3, Bob. It was the Carolina Panthers hosting the New Orleans Saints. They'd lost 9 in a row. And in the pregame show, for the few of you that joined us for that, you knew that I had a weird feeling going into that game, saying this is kind of a Saints game to lose, just leading up to it. 9 straight losses for the Panthers. They hadn't played very well offensively. New Orleans was getting Kamara back. There was a lot of things that just kind of added up to, I feel like I've seen this script before. I think I've read it before. And what do you know? The Saints didn't come out and play their best football at all. Interestingly enough, Bob, Baker Mayfield, after week 3, has the lowest quarterback rating of any quarterback in the NFL. So with that said, the Saints defense did what they could to keep the team in the game. However, that offense, outside of Chris Olave, was almost non-existent. Bob, keeping it PG, especially because you have your own son in the room.
Right.
How would you describe the Saints' performance in week 3?
I'd give them an F, and that's only because you can't go any lower than an F. First of all, before we get into that, and Brendan, I know you'll echo this. I'd like to send out prayers and thoughts for safety for anyone that's in the way of the hurricane that's rolling in as we speak, through the Florida Gulf Coast. I heard today that it slightly changed course, that it was now projected to go directly across Florida, get into the Western Atlantic, and then perhaps shift again to hit coastal Carolinas. But any of our viewers, if you yourself or your family is in harm's way, please be safe. Evacuate if you can, and keep us posted in the Bayou Blitz group, or either on Brendan or my pages, to let us know how you're doing.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I think many of you that are in New Orleans know exactly what it's like to go through something like this and have to evacuate on the multiple occasions over the last 2-3 decades that members of the Gulf Coast region have had to do that. So anybody in Tampa, I was talking to a buddy of ours, a former intern with the Saints News Network the other day that's down there working with the Detroit Tigers organization. They were evacuating just a few days ago. So this is a real serious thing. I know all of you know that. So thoughts and prayers out to those people. And like Bob said, if you or loved ones are in its path or projected path, please keep us updated in the Bayou Blitz Facebook group, or just message Bob or I directly. Let us know that you guys are okay. Definitely need to know that, and definitely thinking of you guys.
Yeah, for sure. But now back to a different tragedy, a less important tragedy, and that is the Saints offense. Once again, I am left scratching my head not to mention throwing things across the room. At the Saints' lack of execution and continued self-inflicted miscues. At first, let's start with Mark Ingram, because this was the third straight week that an Ingram miscue. The first 2 weeks were fumbles, and then to be slightly fair to Mark, it was one of those questionable yet convenient Goodell penalties. But it was another Mark Ingram mistake that short-circuited a Saints drive that was sure to put points on the board. And then, right after that, if I'm not mistaken, Jameis Winston takes a sack to take him even further out of field goal range. And you took 3 points off the board. Will Lutz missed one field goal, had another blocked. Offensive penalties continue to kill this team. And Jameis Winston continues to hold on to the football too long, and or bypass shorter reads, easier throws. The mantra, take what the defense gives you. I know that that's never been Jameis Winston's style, but that's a corner that we all thought that Jameis had turned last year, under Sean Payton, and with Coach Payton presumably in his ear, about taking the safer plays and not making the big mistakes. We're not seeing this. Neither Jameis Winston or this entire offense doing that kind of thing. And the offensive line, although better in pass protection, still can't get any footing in the ground game at all. That takes balance out of the equation. When you have a team that's quarterbacked really by anybody, but especially by a gunslinger like Jameis Winston, if you take balance out of this Saints offense, they're in deep, deep, deep trouble. And they can't get out of their own way right now.
Well, it was Alvin Kamara that said after the game that the Saints continue to shoot themselves in the foot, and that's the most frustrating part, and that's keeping it PG. If you want to see the full excerpt, just Google it. But Kamara was very honest about what's going on. And one of the biggest concerns that I have after watching that game in the first few weeks of the season, and even dating into last season, is the on-field chemistry between Alvin Kamara and Jameis Winston. I mean, you look at the numbers, and Kamara is in career lows in receptions over the course of this season and the 7 games that he had with Jameis last season. It seems like the chemistry's not right there. I'm sure tons of you saw either from the game tape footage or the all-22 footage, the 3rd and 3 deep in the red zone, where Jameis had Alvin Kamara wide open right in front of him. You dump it to Kamara, you pick up a first down, it's 1st and goal, you keep the drive alive, and Winston did not do so. Now, with that said, I'm not trying to stir a pot or say these two don't get along or anything. I'm saying there's obviously chemistry issues. And let's be honest and let's be fair, both to Jameis and both to Alvin. Alvin had one of the best, if not the best, short and intermediate passer of all time through the first 4 or 5 years of his career. Jameis is not that, right? He's a gunslinging type of quarterback, and it takes time to grow the chemistry needed. But when you have, and they said it on the broadcast 100 times on Sunday, when you have one of, if not the most dangerous offensive weapon in the league in Alvin Kamara, and you're limiting his touches because you're unable to get him involved in the receiving game, even after the fact Thomas and Landry went down with injuries, there's concern and there's problem. When I evaluate what happened on Sunday, again, I think the defense did enough. And I'm a firm believer, Bob, if your defense holds the other team to 20 or fewer points, you should win most of those outings. And especially Saints offenses of past, that should have been no problem. Now, they were right at, 22? So I still think the defense did what they had to. And remember, they only surrendered a portion of that because of the fumble recovery by the Panthers for a touchdown early in the ballgame. So I think the Saints defense did more than enough to keep the New Orleans Saints in the ballgame and give the Saints offense a chance. With that said, we both picked Chris Olave as an X factor in the pregame show, and he now leads the Saints in receptions and receiving yards. He's leading all rookies in receiving yards. It was nice to see that kind of blossom after a sour taste in his mouth the way that last week ended for him. However,
yeah, it was. And the way I wanted to see, and the way I hoped to see Olave used was exactly the way they used him. The week before against Tampa Bay, we saw nothing but deep routes from Chris Olave. While he is very talented in that aspect, I think to continue to use Chris Olave in that way only would be misusing Chris Olave. And on Sunday against Carolina, we did see more short and intermediate throws to Olave. Wide receiver screens, wide receiver flares, quick slants, quick outs, that kind of thing, just to get the ball out of Jameis's hands quickly, number one, and into the hands of one of his playmakers, number two. So, I think that usage of Olave was very beneficial to the entire Saints offense, and it's something that I hope that we'll see going forward. But back to Kamara, and I know I'm going to piss off some Alvin Kamara fans when I say this, and believe me, I love Kamara as a player. But this is not the same Alvin Kamara I've been watching, for the first 4.5 years of his career. Alvin, to me, looks almost disinterested as a receiver coming out of the backfield. Now, what I don't know is, first of all, I'm not going to attribute it to just the rib injury, because this wasn't just, on Sunday we saw an easy drop and two more plays where I think Alvin Kamara should have, and we've seen him make those plays in the past. So, that's three balls right there. But it wasn't just Sunday that I'm talking about. It's through the early portion of this season and through the second half of last season. I'm just not seeing the same Alvin Kamara running routes out of the backfield, be it screens, wheel routes, or even when he lines up outside out of the slot. So maybe it's Kamara frustrated with his lack of usage. But if that's the case, if you're unhappy with your job, you don't do less at your job, hoping that they give you more to do. That made sense in my head. But I don't think there's any doubt that Alvin Kamara needs to be much, much more involved in this Saints offense, especially this coming Sunday against Minnesota, who has a very physical front, puts a lot of pressure on the passer. You need to get the ball out of Jameis Winston's hands very quickly. If I were Pete Carmichael, and I'm beginning to, never mind, I'll stop there. If I were Pete Carmichael, I would install a very short to intermediate, quick rhythmic passing game. I know that doesn't play to Jameis's strengths, but we also know that he can make those throws. Force him to get Alvin Kamara involved in the offense. Force him to target Michael Thomas. Force him to get the ball out of his hands quickly. Ignore all deep routes early in the game. In fact, I wouldn't even run them. In my first 15, 20 scripted plays. I would spread the Vikings out sideline to sideline. Football 101 is this. You get the ball in the hands of your best playmakers. Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry, Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave. The Saints are chock full of those types of playmakers. You get the ball in their hands and out of your quarterback's hands as quickly as possible, especially when you continue to have protection issues up front.
Well, and so piggyback off your point on Kamara, and this has been a week against the Vikings. Obviously, Kamara has some history with the Vikings going back to 2017. And of course, the 6 touchdowns on Christmas just a few years ago. Now, seeing the highlights of the 6 touchdowns on Christmas pop up on your Twitter feed time and time again, it's fun to rewatch that. Mm-hmm. And I have a few times. And that Alvin Kamara is not the same Alvin Kamara we're seeing. And I'm not saying that incredible once-in-a-lifetime performance because, shoot, let's be honest, Bob. You and I have watched football for a long time. Between the two of us, we have years and years and years. And I would almost safely bet we'll never see something like that again, where you see 6 rushing touchdowns and what should have been 7. Taysom should not have been given the ball inside the 5 with a record on the line. I will die on that. I will die on that hill. Should have been 7. But nonetheless, that style of swagger and aggression and that type of mindset, Alvin Kamara, we haven't seen. What I'm seeing now, Bob, is a lot like 2019 when Kamara missed a handful of weeks due to injury. And when he did play, he didn't look himself. I don't know if it's so much injury, if it's frustration, if it's a little bit of both, right? But this is not the same Alvin Kamara we've seen. And let's be perfectly honest and perfectly clear. Kamara is not the reason that this offense is struggling.
No,
right? It's not just on Kamara. There's a lot of different things. And Bob just said it best. If anything, you have to find ways to get Alvin more involved because of the type of generational talent that Alvin Kamara is. Kamara still hasn't found the end zone, this year.
Right.
Which, for a guy who's knocking on the door of a franchise record is quite shocking to me. So again, I don't know if it's the injuries. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure what it is, but we're not seeing the same Alvin Kamara. It is concerning, and this is a really good opportunity against the Vikings, a team that he has made very clear he loves playing against.
Mm-hmm.
It is a really good opportunity for Alvin to come out and have his welcome to 2022 type of party. But before we move on from the Carolina game, we talked about Chris Olave. We talked about some of the things that he did really well. Talked about the fact that he's starting to kind of grow into his own. With that said, Bob, the Saints were very shorthanded at the end of the game at receiver with the injuries to Landry, Thomas, and Traquan, who didn't have a bad outing against Carolina. Actually, a little surprised to see how much he was used in the ball game.
Yeah.
Remember, Hardy was inactive for the game. So you really had Olave. You had Callaway, who had a stellar one-handed grab, but you're still not seeing a whole lot of production out of the tight ends. And Jameis had his moments where he looked like Jameis of last year, late in the ball game. He also had his moments where he looked like the Jameis of 2019, where he threw 30 picks. How much of this performance over the first 3 weeks of the season for Jameis Winston do you think is on play calling? How much of it do you think is on the injury? And how much of it is it just Jameis being in his own head? Is it a mix of three? Where are you at with that, Bob?
I'm taking it as a pretty even mixture of the three. When I saw Jameis Winston on Sunday, he looked like a guy that was really affected by that back injury. Either the extra padding that he was wearing or the pain that he was in or both. He looked like he labored getting the ball out on more than one occasion. One thing about Jameis Winston is that he has tremendous arm talent. But he looked like he was shot putting the ball out at times. If that's the case, then if you're Dennis Allen, you have to sit this man. You have to see if he can arrest the injury and come back a little bit stronger. Jameis did, according to John Hendricks, Jameis did sit out practice today. Andy Dalton worked with the first team, and surprise, surprise to no one, Taysom Hill took reps at quarterback. Now, we've known all along that Taysom Hill would be your emergency quarterback if things ever started to go sideways. And I think that that's all this is. This is not a quarterback controversy brewing. It would not surprise me if the same thing happened tomorrow as well, Thursday practice, or if Jameis was just limited. At this point, you need to rest that back as much as you can. But if he's going to continue to be labored, getting rid of the football, again, either by padding or by the effect of the injury itself, you have to sit him, because this is why you brought Andy Dalton in, to be an experienced backup, a capable experienced backup to lead your offense if something happened to your starter. Well, guess what, Dennis Allen? Something has happened to your starter. At the same time, I'm not going to use the excuse of injury, and I don't think Jameis would either. He's clearly in his own head right now. When he's bypassing easy, short targets to gun the ball into double and triple coverage, it's him trying to shoulder too much of the load. And that's what kind of competitor he is. That's where Sean Payton was very successful with Jameis because he was able to reel it in. So I'm also going to throw a fourth category in and blame it on the coaching, which is kind of a caveat of the play calling. Pete Carmichael is in charge of the offense. Dennis Allen is in charge of the entire team, at least in theory. Now, neither one of those guys are in your face, intense guys like Sean Payton was, but you could still get your point across to your quarterback or several other players on this roster that need a wake-up call by just getting in their head, reasoning with them, and constant looking over the shoulder until they start doing the things that you want them to do in your system. So there's no doubt that Jameis needs to spread the ball around. Jameis needs to get the ball in the hands of his playmakers. But it's also just as clear that the injury is affecting him, and if it's going to affect him this much, you play Andy Dalton. If you do think that Jameis can go, then you gear your game plan around, again, I'm going to say it this whole show, getting rid of the ball quickly, not forcing him to feel like he has to force the ball into coverage down the field. You brought in Jarvis Landry and Chris Olave for a reason, ladies and gentlemen. And it's not to attack deep down the field in that Bruce Arians attack where Jameis did chuck up the 30 interceptions. You can work this Vikings defense. You could work defenses sideline to sideline. Get rid of that ball quickly. Take advantage of your playmakers in space.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, especially when it comes to the injury with Jameis. If it is as bad as it sounds, as bad as it looked at times, it might be time for a change. However, if he's healthy and you think he's healthy enough and the best option to win you a football game, I still think that Jameis is better than Andy Dalton at this point. And I think we both, as analysts and writers and people that have really seen Jameis Winston grow as a person and a football player the last handful of years, still think that he has as good of a shot as anybody else to be the answer for New Orleans for the next handful of years. With that said, there's more concerns now than there were the last season, right? Even the games New Orleans lost with Jameis last season, there was a lot of optimism around Jameis Winston. And a lot of it was because he wasn't turning the ball over. The Saints lead the NFL in turnovers. 5 interceptions, 4 fumbles lost, 9 total in 3 weeks. I mean, that's not a winning recipe.
No.
You can throw some of that on Jameis, right? 5 picks, all coming from Jameis. But you have 4 fumbles, and that goes on Mark Ingram, that goes on Olave, that goes on Kamara, right? There's a lot of ways we can kind of dig this up. I do think the offensive line's been bad at times, but the analytics are saying that Jameis is having about 4 seconds per pass attempt to get rid of the football.
But 3 of those are running for if you're using PFF, we all know what those Fs stand for, and they deserve both Fs. It's fine if the analytics show that your quarterback has 4 seconds to throw the ball, but if 3 of those seconds are still running for his life behind the line of scrimmage, then and that's what my eyes are telling me.
That's fair. No, that's fair. I don't think it's quite the Archie Manning days, but I do think that Jameis is spending a lot of time running for his life, which goes right to the injuries to the back of the ankle, right? He's not as mobile as he was last year because of the injuries. But I do think that this week is going to be really telling. Like Bob said, you had Andy Dalton take the first string snaps. You saw Taysom Hill get some work in at quarterback. Jameis did speak to the media after practice, and he did say he has all intentions of playing on Sunday and starting on Sunday, that this was a built-in rest day to try to get healthy. Now, I'd have more concerns if Jameis does not go at all, even in a limited sense, tomorrow towards his status for Sunday. But I think full-heartedly that what Dennis Allen said post-game on Sunday is going to be true, is that he still has full faith in Jameis, and there's no need for a quarterback change at this time. So, one last thing before we move past Carolina. Finally saw the Saints get to the quarterback a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
What made you happy about the defense, Bob? What made you cringe a little bit about the defense? And overall, where do you think the defense is at this point? Because I think there's a lot of people, both fans and analysts alike, that have the Saints at different points defensively right now.
Yeah, they do, and it's all over the board. And I'll just say this. I think it's quite obvious to even the most cynic observer that the Saints defense is trending upward, certainly further upward than the offense. I was happy to see signs of life from the pass rush, something that we did not see over the first 2 weeks. And I love seeing Paulson Adebo back on the field. I know he was on a limited pitch count, but yeah, that's a good sign for the defense going forward. And Bradley Roby and Marshawn Lattimore had spectacular games on Sunday. When you hold receivers like Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore to 2 combined receptions for 16 yards on, I think it was 13 or 14 targets, your cornerbacks are doing their job. What concerns me is the run defense continues to concern me. I know McCaffrey got McCaffrey's 108 yards were extremely hard earned, but the Panthers themselves got 140 or 145 yards as a team on the ground. So that tells me that the run defense is not performing up to the capabilities to make the opponents one-dimensional. And that's why, they held Baker Mayfield in check and really shut him down. They shut down Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore, but the Panthers were still confident enough to continue using the ground game, thinking that they'd get at least a few yards a pop. They never at any point felt like that their run game was completely non-existent and just chuck it by the wayside. And that's the Saints defense that had so much success over the previous 3 or 4 years. The type of defense that makes opponents believe we cannot run the ball against them, so we need to stop trying. That's not what we've seen so far, and that's a big, big concern going forward. And New Orleans, look at the numbers too. New Orleans has given up 2 100-yard rushers in 3 weeks. This is not that same Saints defense. So again, trending upward, but the run defense still needs to shore itself up. And with the coverage, and I know Marcus May was out, but we lauded this team for having a lot of depth in the secondary. And I think Justin Evans still played a solid game. PJ Williams did not. You gave up pathetic tackling to LaVisca freaking Chenault on that 67-yard touchdown pass that really killed your chance to win the game. You were killed throughout the game, but Chenault had another big reception. Ian Thomas, Shi Smith, Tommy Tremble, Ricci, the fullback. They all had big receptions and big moments, which means your other coverage units are letting you down. Whether it's Pete Werner, Demario Davis, who's gotten off to a shaky start for Demario, for his high level. Your safety play, all those guys, they need to start making some turnovers. And let these also-rans. Stop these also-rans from beating them. It's great. Lattimore is having a great season. Roby played spectacular ball on Sunday, and we know what Adebo can do. I think he's an all-pro caliber talent in the making. But the rest of this defense, they really have to shore themselves up. And I think it was Pete Werner that said it today in regards to the opposing running games. That they've identified, the opposition has identified what the Saints don't do well in the run game and take advantage of it. Well, Pete, there's one way to combat that. Stop doing things poorly.
Easier said than done, right?
I obviously. I mean, you have an opponent that wants to win a game every bit as much as you do. But we thought coming into the season that the Saints defense would have to carry the team to a certain extent until the offense, kind of evened itself out and found an identity. And that's certainly proven to be true. But the defense, even against Carolina, I thought the defense played below overall, their overall grade was below expectations.
And I want to speak on what Scoob just threw out there. Tyrann Mathieu not impressing so far. He's had trouble. These on that big touchdown you were just referencing. Mathieu misses a tackle along with PJ Williams. Gets trucked over in week 2. Speaking about Tyrann Mathieu, he's struggled to tackle efficiently. And like you said, Bob, I think the secondary is one of the stronger points, if not the strongest point of the defense this season. And I think Matthew's doing more that doesn't show up in the numbers than some people realize. But in terms of having, and we talked about it on Sunday, having that breakout moment, playing for your hometown team, Saints fans are still waiting for it when it comes to Tyrann Mathieu. But that's the expectation. And I don't know if it's really fair to Tyrann. But this is where the expectation level is because he's the honey badger. He makes plays. So you can still be about right here, not too far down, and just being a solid player. And especially an upgrade from Malcolm Jenkins from a year ago in certain aspects. But when you got to have that breakout moment to get from here to here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the issue that I think a lot of fans are having with Mathieu at this point. And, Marcus May missed last week, but same with Marcus May is being compared to Marcus Williams, who, yes, Marcus Williams had his moments as a tackler where he really struggled, but one of the best, if not the best ball hawking safety in the NFL since he joined the NFL in 2017. When you get those type of comparisons and you haven't had that breakthrough moment yet, you start getting a little worried if you're a fan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, us sitting here, it's a little different. We see what else they do, what the really positive things that they've contributed, and the fact that for the most part, there hasn't been a real knock on wood. There hasn't really been coverage breakdowns for the most part, which is something we were both worried about when you plug in 2 brand new safeties to the system.
Yeah.
So for those fans that are sitting and saying Mathieu hasn't lived up to expectations, May hasn't lived up to expectations, what would your counter be?
I would agree with them hesitantly, especially Mathieu. But I would counter by saying the entire defense hasn't lived up to expectations. The pass rush hasn't been disruptive enough. Even on Sunday they played better, but still not up to their capabilities. Demario Davis hasn't had a breakout game yet this year. Marshawn Lattimore, I'd give an A+ for his performance so far. Granted, a couple of losses, key losses of composure in week 1 or week 2, has overshadowed the fact that receivers just aren't getting open against him. Period. He's covering as well as I've ever seen him cover. Roby has had some shaky moments. Adebo's been beat up. Didn't play it down until Sunday. So the entire defense has played below expectations. So that goes along with the safety play of May and Mathieu, because they're playing solid football, but they aren't carrying this team. They aren't making a difference. They aren't getting the big sack. They aren't getting the big turnover. They aren't getting the big short, 3rd and short or 4th and short stops, with the exception of the 4th quarter against Atlanta in week 1. They aren't getting those stops that just pump up your entire sideline with momentum. And that's what we need to see from this unit.
Well, headed into week 4, Marshawn Lattimore has yet another tough challenge in Justin Jefferson, who has disappointed the last few weeks. So I know Jefferson's going to be bringing his A game because he hasn't lived up to his expectations over the last 2 weeks. Lattimore has been, in my opinion, the best coverage corner in the league through 3 weeks. You just look at his man-to-man numbers against Drake London and Kyle Pitts. You look at his man-to-man numbers against Mike Evans, the little bit that they were both on the field, and then the man-to-man numbers against DJ Moore, who we think is one of the most underrated receivers in football. And Lattimore has been good. But before we jump into week 4, Bob, the New Orleans Saints debuted something really exciting at practice today. It was the alternate helmets. Remember, back in the early 70s, the Saints wore a black alternate helmet in a preseason game that the NFL did not approve. So it was just that one preseason game that the New Orleans Saints were able to wear those before the league came back and said no. So for what? How many years is that off the top of my head? For so many years, Saints fans have been waiting for a black helmet. And as we work through some connection issues with Bob, Bob has the alternate helmet in hand for those that have not seen it yet this season. But it's an exciting time. Now, according to NFL rules, the New Orleans Saints cannot. There we go. Bob's back, a little bit frozen still. We're still working on it. But per league rules, and I didn't know this until this week, the New Orleans Saints cannot wear the black helmets with the black uniform in a game. So we won't be seeing that this season or in the seasons in the future. And that changes. But the Saints will wear the black helmets with the color rush jerseys against the Vikings in London. Give Bob a little bit more time to work out whatever's going on. Obviously, technology is your best friend till it's not, am I right? So going into week 4, New Orleans Saints and the Minnesota Vikings kickoffs at 9:30 in the morning Eastern time, so 8:30 in the morning Central time. Guys, I want to see your comments. What do you guys think of the black alternate helmets? But this is going to be an interesting matchup for the New Orleans Saints because this is a Minnesota team that a lot of people have competing not just in the NFC North, but maybe a dark horse in the NFC as a whole. And I brought up Justin Jefferson. Obviously, a lot of people in the Louisiana area very familiar with Justin Jefferson. He hasn't been on his A game as of late. We'll see if he brings it against New Orleans. And Bob's back. Are we frozen? No, we're not. All right, Bob, black helmet after some technical difficulties. There black is helmet. The alternate helmet. Oh, look at that.
I love these because these are little fleur-de-lis right here. For those of you that are curious, I got this off the NFL Fanatics site, just to add to my Saints collection back here. I have not yet got a player to autograph this. We're working on that one, but.
Well, I was giving the brief history, Bob. I'm sure you can correct me if I left out any important details, but the Saints wore black helmets back in the early 70s in a preseason game. However, yes, the league did not approve it. So it was the one preseason game the Saints were able to wear those. They never wore a black helmet again until this Sunday morning with the alternate helmet. So what, 50 years fans have been waiting for a black helmet in a regular season game, and they're finally going to get it. Bob, you already have people asking if you're going to be raffling the black helmet off. I'm going to say it's a solid no, Scoob. Let's see. Finally get to wear it in a game as the black helmets look nice with the jerseys. Yeah, but as I said, Joe, per league rules, the Saints can't wear black on black. Didn't find that out until this morning, but they cannot wear the black helmets on the black jerseys. That was per Nick Underhill. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but you know, NFL stands for No Fun League. Let's see. Black helmets are menacing. Maybe they'll bring some attitude with them. I hope so. The Saints definitely need it. Could you give each of us a black helmet as a bonus for being a part of the show? I don't even have one yet. Be Kind asks why. I will do a little digging. I do have to give credit where credit is due. It was New Orleans Football that reported that today, that the Saints can't wear black on black in a game, but they are in practice, and those photos looked really good. Yeah, and some of the video did too. Really excited for that new alternate helmet. And the Saints, remember, they're able to wear it for a handful of games this year. The only game that's been announced so far is this game in London. I would be willing to bet whether it's when Atlanta comes to the Dome, I could see the Saints wear the black helmets, but they're definitely going to wear them at home this year because the fans are going to want to see that. John Butler said, "I will DM you my address for the free black helmet. Thanks." Bob, you're giving stuff away. I didn't even know. Where's mine?
I didn't know either. Folks, we are Brendan and I do plan on doing some sort of Bayou Blitz giveaway this year.
Absolutely.
We haven't discussed exactly what it is, because I have a couple of Bayou Blitz T-shirts that I had custom made. So yeah, we'd actually, as a sidebar, we'd actually like to hear some fan involvement. What would you like to be involved in a giveaway? Would you like Brendan and I to sign it? The budding media superstars that we
Oh
are.
God.
Anything like that. So that maybe that'll be a poll question for one of these upcoming weeks. You guys have been so great with us, and helped your Bayou Blitz podcast grow. That I think that we're going to run a giveaway during the season, and money permitting, because Brendan and I aren't as rich as we appear. Money permitting, we'll do a giveaway in the off season as well.
I was gonna say, let's just go 2 for 1. You could do one on bye week later this season. We could do one sometime in the middle of the season as well. We'll make something work. And I'm sure. Oh, Scoop says yes, signed for sure. Wow, how about that? Well, I mean, Bob, come on, you're a Hall of Famer, right? In some aspects, I've won some things too. I'm not in a Hall of Fame, but like I've won things. Does that count? But nonetheless,
that means you got the lucky touch, which I throughout my life I have not. But folks, for those that don't know my history, Brendan is right. I am a Hall of Fame track coach. Through West Allegheny High School, we put together. It was definitely a team effort. We put together a dynasty on both the boys and the girls side, and I was lucky enough to have some terrific athletes that I had the honor of coaching. And volleyball too, but and track especially, and got my name down in infamy for a good occasion, for a good cause. And I also had a very good volleyball career too, very, very good despite my size. So yeah, that's my brief history. Not that any of you really wanted to know that.
I can confirm. First time I met Bob, I did not expect to be that much taller than Bob. And I'm not that tall. At least I don't think I'm that tall at 6'1", but nonetheless.
37-inch vertical leap and 4.3 speed back in the day helped me out tremendously.
Yeah, I don't have either of those things. My vertical might be like a -4. I sink when I try to jump. But back to the important stuff.
Right.
Saints Vikings in London. 9:30 in the morning Eastern time kickoff, 8:30 in the morning Central. So, Bob, you and I are going to need about 27 cups of coffee for the pregame show, because I don't even want to know what time in the morning we're going to be going live on the Bayou Blitz pregame. We might send you guys some bags of coffee to join us. There's your giveaway. But nonetheless. I was saying, as you were going in and out of our internet world, that Justin Jefferson, Marshawn Lattimore is going to be a really interesting matchup. Obviously, a lot of people in the Louisiana area very familiar with Justin Jefferson, a guy that I was hoping the Saints would draft the year that he came out. And he's been a stud so far in the NFL. He's been quiet the last couple of weeks. I might get some slack for this, but Kirk Cousins is a super disrespected quarterback, because I think a lot of people put him towards the bottom of the league, and he's an above average quarterback. I mean, he's been a long-time starter, and he's had his moments. He hasn't really had those playoff moments, but he's had some of those single game moments, and I think that he's still a very effective guy in the league, and it'll be really interesting to see how he takes this Vikings team that some people are seeing as a dark horse contender in the NFC the rest of the way. Now, they've had some big injuries, though, Bob, offensively, and that could certainly hinder them. But before we get to their offense, because there's so many different keys that we could talk about there, I think their defense gets overlooked a lot. What are some keys, or who are some keys on that defense that could really, really hinder the Saints on Sunday?
I'll tell you, I'll start with the Vikings front seven. They are a big physical bunch, and they are all downhill defenders. They pressure opposing backfields and they like to make a living back there. They switched to a 3-4 front from a 43 front coming into this season, but that's in name only because their outside linebackers, their edge rushers, are Daniil Hunter, Zadarius Smith, and DJ Wanham. Those guys are all three of those guys are defensive end folks. You're not going to see them in pass coverage. So this is still a modified 43 front out of their base defense. But if you guys remember what the Vikings did, the Vikings were really the first the first team in that 2020 wild card game. Really the first team to expose the New Orleans Saints interior pass blocking because they moved Daniil Hunter and their edge rushers inside and put the pressure on Andrus Peat and at the time Larry Warford to stop them, and they couldn't do it. And that's one of the main reasons why the Saints lost that game. Don't be surprised if you see the same kind of strategy. Zadarius Smith, Daniil Hunter, DJ Wanham, they can all get after the quarterback. They already have a five combined sacks and I think like 12 or 13 pressures this year. And that's a little bit low for them. They're capable of more. Inside linebackers, Eric Kendricks, Jordan Hicks are as good as they come. Very big physical defenders. Where I think they can be had, though, is on the edge. Kendricks and Hicks are great downhill defenders, and Kendricks especially has terrific play anticipation, but they're both limited athletically. Advantage in space, Alvin Kamara, no question about it. Their backups at inside linebacker, Troy Dye and Brian Asamoah, the rookie, they're the exact opposite. They're smaller guys, very athletic, very, very good in coverage, but I don't know how much snap time those guys are going to get, ahead of guys like Kendricks and Hicks, because you don't bench those guys. Vikings are a very, very hard team to run inside against. And, I know the last time Kamara was on the field with them, he went for 155 yards, a career high, and 6 touchdowns, like you pointed out earlier. The big difference in that matchup, some guy named Breeze was playing at quarterback for the New Orleans Saints back then.
Don't know who that is.
He was pretty good. And the thing about Drew Brees in that game, his arm was basically shot by this point in his career. But Drew would always tax a defense east to west, sideline to sideline. And Brees actually threw for over 300 yards in that Christmas Day drubbing of the Vikings. It gets lost in the shuffle of Kamara's historic performance. But what that did, since Brees was really unable to go down the field consistently at that point in his career, he just shattered a defense from sideline to sideline. Minnesota had to respond by defending sideline to sideline, thereby leaving cutback lanes for guys like Kamara, Taysom Hill, who has had a pretty successful career in limited snaps against the Vikings too. That's how you beat this Vikings defense. I don't see them able to go straight downhill at them. They're too big and physical for that. But they have an inexperienced secondary. And when you have an inexperienced secondary, right now they're 29th in passing yardage, that defense is. So they can be had. Again, I come back to you force Winston to get the ball out of his hands quickly. You tax the Vikings defense sideline to sideline because they're going to come after their passer. You know that they're going to do it with success. So you want to have your battered quarterback get the ball in the hands of Michael Thomas quickly, and Thomas has had some good games against the Vikings coverage. Have him get it out of his hands quickly to Chris Olave. Wide receiver screens, slants, back shoulder throws along the sideline. Something 3-step drop, read, go. And you do that, and you're going to force the Vikings to start to defend those boundaries. And when you do that, that's going to allow Kamara running room over the guard and over the tackle, and where a player with his spectacular vision can see those cutback lanes because there's actually room for it. The Panthers, the Buccaneers, and to a lesser extent the Falcons, they brought so many defenders in the box because they blitzed Jameis Winston nonstop. They brought so many defenders in the box because they wanted to shut down those cutback lanes, and prevent Kamara and Ingram and Taysom from beating them that way. And thus far, the Saints have not beaten that kind of strategy. Well, you beat that kind of strategy by telling your quarterback, telling Jameis Winston, you hit Michael Thomas over here, you hit Jarvis Landry over here. That's gonna slow that blitz. That's going to force the Vikings or whatever defense to start to, they're still going to creep up and crowd the line of scrimmage, but they're going to fake blitz. And once they get into that trend, you can change your play calls. You can use your pre-snap reads to recognize certain keys that the linebackers and safeties of the Vikings are going to give off, and change your play, audible to a running play to Kamara, or audible to a quick hitch to a guy like Michael Thomas, Chris Olave. Allow them to break tackles in the open field, because the Vikings secondary is, even though they're young, they're athletic. And the two guys that aren't young back there are two seasoned all pros, Patrick Peterson and Harrison Smith at safety. You're not going to fool those guys a whole lot, but you're also not going to beat them down the field. Especially if you're going to be pressed by that Vikings pass rush. You try to go down the field against this kind of defense, you're going to throw 3 or 4 picks, I promise you.
Talking about the wide receivers, Gypsy wants to know how serious the injuries of Thomas and Landry are. Well, thankfully for Saints fans, initial reports are that both of them avoided long-term injuries. However, that doesn't mean they're not lingering injuries that could keep them out and have them considered to be a week-to-week type of guy. Both guys missed practice today. Mm-hmm. There is some optimism that they could play on Sunday. However, I wouldn't hold your breath for both. I'd expect one or the other. I'm leaning more towards Thomas playing this week.
Same.
And Landry not. Right now, that's just based off speculation. Outside of the injury report, we don't have really any further intel, and John Hendricks hasn't tipped his hat to us one way or the other as well, which means that I don't think John has a strong sense of what's going to happen either. And that's coming from, soldiers' feet on the ground over there in London. I don't want this to get lost, Bob. So our favorite, John Butler, how tall are you?
I'm 5'7" in shoes. Now old age, I think, has shrunk me an inch. So, so I might not be that anymore. But yeah, on my best day, I was 5'7" and change. I know for a fact I'm not that anymore.
Don't tell me that. I'm getting older. I don't want to get under 6 feet, Bob. Don't tell me that. Quick, also want to say, because it's all over the comments, happy birthday week, Scoob. Hope you have a good birthday on Saturday. I'm sure we'll see you on Sunday morning.
Happy birthday, Scoob.
Yeah, we'll also tell you that on Sunday morning, I'm sure, if you're awake. Like I said earlier, we're going to need coffee ourselves, so that's going to be a challenge. Looking at the Saints defense towards this Vikings offense, without giving too much away for Sunday, I mentioned Justin Jefferson. I mentioned Kirk Cousins, Dalvin Cook with an injury. Who are some guys to look at outside of Justin Jefferson on this Vikings squad?
Well, the Vikings are a team with a quarterback, and you have much more glowing praise of Kirk Cousins than I do.
Captain Kirk, you like that?
I loathe Kirk Cousins. I would hate to have him on a team that I am rooting for. But having said that, in 5 career games against the Saints, he has averaged over 300 yards. He's thrown for over 304 of those 5 games. He's only 1-3 with the Vikings as a starter against New Orleans, but again, he's averaged 304 yards, 68% completion percentage with 9 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions. Now the Saints have sacked him 10 times, and that's the key on Cousins. You need to A, shut down his running game. B, somebody needs to convince him with the time change in London that he's actually playing in prime time, because prime time Kirk Cousins is complete trash. Because if he gets time and he gets the ball out of his hand.
Is it prime time? I mean, it's got to be prime time. You're the only game on that at that time. So in a weird way, it is prime time, right?
In a weird way, yeah. We got to start sending memos out to London. To get on MI6 to plant some things. Plant some messages around Kirk Cousins' hotel room. But yeah, listen, and Justin Jefferson is an elite talent. There is no doubt that I expect Marshawn Lattimore to be on him man on man more often than not. And that's going to be a key individual battle to watch. But Adam Thielen is a guy who has killed the New Orleans Saints throughout his career. In 5 games against the Saints, he has 37 catches for 560 yards. Had at least 97 yards receiving in 4 of those 5 games. So Adam Thielen is no slouch. Irv Smith Jr. is one of my favorite tight ends in the league. He hasn't really got on track yet because the chemistry between he and Cousins just has never been dead on right. But Irv Smith is a guy that we just got done talking about Tyrann Mathieu, Marcus May, Demario Davis, and coverage. Those guys better come to play because Irv Smith Jr. has the type of skill set that can single-handedly take over and make enough plays to take over the momentum of a game. The Vikings running game, you mentioned Dalvin Cook, and Dalvin is a handful for any defense, but he's dealing with a shoulder injury, and he actually might not play on Sunday. At this stage, it's 50-50 at best. But Alexander Mattison, and Brandon, I know you do fantasy segments. Mattison is a favorite amongst fantasy owners for what they call a handcuff for Dalvin Cook, because Mattison can make play. Even when Dalvin Cook is 100% healthy, Mattison gets some key snaps. He's a terrific receiver out of the backfield, but he's lightning in the open field as well. Off tackle plays, things like that. He'll get to the second level of a defense like that and has the ability to take it to the house. So that's still a dangerous Minnesota backfield, even if Dalvin Cook does not play.
Well, you're absolutely right. In deep PPR leagues, he's a flex option week in and week out because of what you said, being great out of the backfield with his hands. And I play in a very deep PPR league. And trust me, he has gotten the better of me so far this season for not being on my roster. I think the biggest thing, and you brought up Adam Thielen, has everybody just forgot how consistent and how good of a receiver he is because he's getting overshadowed by Justin Jefferson? Would you not give, maybe not this season because the Saints are actually pretty solid at receiver this year when everybody's healthy, but in years past, what would have you given up for a guy like Adam Thielen to go opposite of Michael Thomas? It would have been a dream come true to have a guy like that.
Yeah, absolutely. You got a guy like Adam Thielen opposite of Michael Thomas in 2018, 2019, 2020. You can book the Saints trip to the Super Bowl. Because Michael Thomas really had, outside of Alvin Kamara, really had zero help at wide receiver, which is something that we were lamenting all those years. Adam Thielen he's been to multiple Pro Bowls, yet still underrated throughout his productive career, like you said. You look throughout the league, and even Adam Thielen in his prime, it was hard to make a case for him being a number 1 guy. But Adam Thielen was Cooper Kupp before Cooper Kupp. And that's how much Adam Thielen terrifies me when my team goes up against him.
Absolutely. And the combo of him and Stephon Diggs there for a couple years. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better running mate for Thielen than Stephon Diggs. Sorry, that probably gave PTSD to a couple people, so my fault. But nonetheless, this is still a really dangerous Vikings offense. I mean, top to bottom, their defense, like you said, they have a little bit of youth in the secondary, but they are a team that, and this is going to be like the 3rd or 4th time I've said it, there's a reason people are picking them as a dark horse favorite in the NFC because the talent's there. It's just a matter of can they put it together. And it's going to be a really interesting test for the New Orleans Saints, and we'll talk more about that on Sunday. Bob, as we wrap up the show, again, want to wish a happy early birthday to Scoob. He's here every week with us, so we really appreciate you, along with Gypsy. I'm going to miss people here. Be Kind, JGP Jr., St. John Butler. I'm still missing people, but nonetheless, you regulars, we appreciate all of you. Big happy birthday to Scoob. Bobo, where can people follow you on the World Wide Web? And what do you have previewed for people throughout the remainder of the week with your articles for Saints News Network?
Ladies and gentlemen, you can follow me on Facebook, Bob Rose, over on Twitter at BobbyR2613. As always, you can follow all of our works, all of our articles through the Saints News Network on Facebook, or at Saints News on Twitter. I did come out with my first of the 4 previews for the Vikings game, with a rush offense versus the Vikings run defense earlier today, and I'll be hitting the other aspects as we go along. I'm going to mix up my order a little bit because there's just so much going on. Normally when I do the run offense first, I'll do the pass offense next. Makes sense, right? And so little that I do makes sense, but that one does. I might wait a little bit and start with the Saints defensive preview because with Jameis Winston probably going to play, but we don't know for sure. What's the status of Michael Thomas? What's the status of Jarvis Landry? What's the status of Deontay Hardy? So I may push that one back and start to preview the Saints defense, both rush and pass, against the Vikings offense. But rest assured, I'll give you all of those as we go along. John Hendricks and I will, along with Brendan Boylan, will always give you X factors, players to watch, and key positions going into this game as well. The 3 of us usually do that for the weekend, if not game day, then the day before. So look for that as well.
For me, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at BT Boylan. Yeah, I'll have X Factors, I'll have some fantasy stuff this week. All the fun little things. It's going to be a fun week for the New Orleans Saints out there in London. What, 3rd time they're in London, if I'm not mistaken? Last time 2017 against Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Got to test my brain here. 2000 and I want to say 2008 or 2010. They were also in London. Am I off by a year? One way or the other?
But Bayou Blitz family, this is why you need to read my articles, because my own teammate here at the Bayou Blitz does not. It is, well, I released the Saints International history earlier this week. I think it was Monday or Tuesday. Hell, I don't even know what day this is, but it was Monday or Tuesday. But you're right, Brendan. It was 2008 against the San Diego Chargers, the first time Brees had faced his former team.
How about that? See, my memory's not that bad yet. I'll have to go back and read the article. It was Monday, Bob. It was Monday. Mondays are tough for everybody.
They are.
I told you, car trouble this week's no fun either, but I'm just coming up with excuses for myself. But yeah. But anyway, guys, we appreciate all that you guys do for us.
Always.
We'll definitely be having some giveaways this season. Bob and I will definitely get on that this week. I do want to touch on this because I love basketball, and New Orleans, you guys have a heck of a team this season. Everybody loves the preseason hype, and it looks like Zion Williamson is the talk of the town again. And man, that kid, at least when I got to see him here in the Carolinas in high school, he was special. He looks like he's back in shape. So really excited for you guys down in New Orleans. It's not the same up here in Charlotte for me. The only good news we got is we signed LiAngelo Ball. So LeVar's prophecies come true, guys. That's all we have. That's all we have. But no, really excited for everybody in New Orleans. I got some Go Pels here at the end, so that's good. That's good. But guys, we will see you Sunday morning. Bob, we're going to shoot for what time in the morning? 7 a.m. Central?
I think so, because if I'm not mistaken, the game is at 8. Kickoff is at 8:30 Central.
Mm-hmm.
Now I assume that not as many of our normal Houdat family is going to be able to attend the game in London. Although I've talked to people that have made the trip. Yeah, I think we'll probably shoot for 7 a.m. Central time.
7 a.m. Central. We'll see you guys then. Make sure to bring your coffee with you. I will make sure to be drinking it out of my Bayou Blitz mug that Mr. Bob Rose provided for me, and maybe for some of you as well. We'll see what happens. But guys, until Sunday, remember to find peace, spread love, practice positivity. That's all the time we have for the Bayou Blitz. See you really early Sunday morning.